Hey everybody, welcome back to the Green Chutes Podcast. With me is Walt. I'm Paul here checking in today, but we're going to start off real quick, talk about a little bit about interest rates. We did have a little cut from the Federal Reserve, I think, since we last had our previous podcasts. I don't think it's impacted. I mean, the Federal Reserve in and of itself doesn't impact mortgage rates directly. It's based on the 10-year bond. So what have you been seeing rate wise though? I think we've seen a tad bit drop though over the last, I guess, week or two since the rates were dropped.
So I can say we have one deal we'll be closing this week is taking a client from a 6.5 to right around near 5% on a rate term. So they're saving
Is that a
a good chunk
refinance?
of money. Yeah, and how we analyze and look at that is what are the costs versus that monthly benefit in the case of a rate and term refinance. But in the case of a cash out, we would look at the other debts, right, that we would potentially be paying off, or that reason why they're taking the cash out as the benefit.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're seeing rates on so, and that was a government product. So on government rate term products, we'd be in the fives most likely, on most credit scores, I would even say. When it comes on the conventional side, we would, we're still in the higher rate realm. And so it's kind of one of those areas where it's like, if there's, in the case of a client we're working with this week, they're going to be selling their current home and recasting their loan, or potentially refinancing, once they pay off some other debt and do some stuff. So there's always a strategy with it of what do we do now, or what can we do later. And the bigger thing, I think, for any American family is to just send less money to banks and financial institutions and to creditors. So we take the look at, like your financial advisor would look at all your assets. A good loan officer would look at all your debts. But if we're talking about a deal, also get those assets in the picture, because we want to try to lower our costs and our APR for people. So appraisal waivers will lower APR. The deal I was telling you about in the lower fives, that was cleared to close in 5 days without an appraisal. The a purchase that we have had come in today is in the low sixes. Putting 3.5% down,
Okay.
which is a pretty good deal, and it's actually paying them a discount, paying our clients a discount.
Okay.
So yeah, I think the market is starting to, now I've kind of taken a sabbatical, right, as you know, Paul, for 2 years, kind of doing something else more during, traditional banking hours. But for me, it's really starting to bounce back and getting a lot more activity. Just refinance calls today, just three, just out of the blue for me, which is good. But I've been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, so good with that. We'll talk a little bit about, we've got you mentioned not paying money to the banks or paying less money to the banks, whether low interest. But interestingly enough, we've got we were going to chat about the Genius Act, which provides regulations for stable coins, which are stable coins, for those who don't know, are the crypto coins. They're stable in the sense that they're supposed to be backed by some risk-free assets. So like treasury bills, I guess technically it could be treasury bills. I don't know that you can consider corporate bonds to be, there can be low risk based on their rating, but they're not necessarily risk-free as you would consider treasury bills. So it's interesting. It's probably been, what I want to say, at least a month or two since it's been passed. So some activity has been happening. Nothing really mainstream now that a lot of people have been picking up on. But I know some of the banks and lenders are working on it too. What are your thoughts on this Genius Act and stablecoins? What have you read about it?
So in preparation, for our discussion tonight, I looked up some things and did some reading, and I'm always following finances because that's the world I work in. And I just have to say, when it comes to these stable coins. If you Google AI search this right now, and you read where it says, the one of the potential benefits, and this is the bigger picture benefit, but it is to basically have entities adopt and take more treasuries, and if they're going to be using these stable coins. So a benefit is, trying to hold off, right, any serious competition to the petrodollar that would emerge um that would emerge in these kind of in the crypto, right, um the crypto evolution that we've been seeing. So I think a lot of it has to do with that particularly. And it's interesting to me that when in the Genius Act, when you have traditionally in the American economy, you have a corporation file for bankruptcy, right? There's different holders of debt and shareholders that take precedence over others. And the stable coin or the Genius Act will kind of allow holders of stable coin to take precedence over other people that are holding, equity, if you will, or holding any sort of stake in that institution. So I think that's something that should be looked at and examined intelligently if we're going to analyze it fairly. And what that could mean for the greater economy. What does that mean for how investors internationally will respond to risk? So all
Yeah.
those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things with it, with stable coins too, especially with the going into the treasuries, especially as, we're kind of heating up in this kind of global competition. The globalization is pulling back. We're not seeing as much in terms of, hey, let's cooperate with our neighbors. It's more, let's slap tariffs on everybody. So part of that too is then, the U.S. with the dollar. The dollar kind of provides the grease that's kind of helps the wheels of commerce move around the world. So a lot of these countries that have a trade surplus with us, where they're selling us more goods, we're giving them more dollars. They need a place to put their dollars if they're not necessarily buying stuff. So treasuries is one of the logical places. They put money in the stock market as well. But with treasuries, it's one of those low risk. The government hasn't defaulted. The government can print the money. It technically can't default if they want. But if those countries decide, hey, we're not going to invest our dollars reserves that we're getting into treasuries because, we're not necessarily having that close relationship as we did in the past. So we'll go into something else. So in order to keep those treasuries still liquid, people still buying, which also keeps the rates lower. If people stop buying, all of a sudden those rates have to go up in order to encourage people to buy more treasuries. But in order to keep those rates lower, by locking these stable coins, either one stable coin equals $1, or you have treasuries there that back up the stable coin, then you're kind of driving an alternate means of cash and money coming back that backs these stable coins, but they're basically funding the U.S. government in the long run there. So that's an
True.
interesting.
And I think there is something to be said here too, that it's a absolutely, when you're when you're taking dollars out of competition, right, at the end of the day, right, it's preventing inflation, or could kind of be a counter to that. So I think there's a lot of reasons why they're moving forward with that. I just think it's something that needs to be watched and looked at, and people need to do their extreme due diligence before investing in anything. I had a quote pop up today that I didn't share, but it was basically Carol Quigley said that, goods are basically your real wealth that you have, right, and money is just like your wealth that you could call in, right, and as far as these numbers in these computers, right, and how do you protect that? You need to diversify.
Yeah,
So I think there's a movement. A lot of investors want to diversify, but there's going to be a movement to push. You know push a return in this market. I think for sure, just given the reasons the two big reasons we stated here as to why the greater system would promote and push this. So,
Yeah, yeah, one of the benefits I see for that system too, especially if these days, not everybody, you know, outside of the US, not everybody can go to a bank and withdraw dollars, so to say. They need to go buy something, they need to transact in something. Now with the stable coin, pretty much everybody these days has a smartphone. Go to your virtual ATM on your smartphone, withdraw some stable coins, and if your neighbor, a local business accepts stable coins as well too, you can easily transact that way. Ultimately, it's backed by the dollar since where most of these stable coins, I mean, they could be backed by other currencies if they want to, but if they want to be recognized in the US, they need to be backed by the US dollar or US treasuries. And that in a way then allows people in foreign countries to transact with US dollars directly or indirectly through these stable coins. It's much easier for them to do. It's, with the phones, especially we've seen a lot these days in developing countries. They're using their smartphones and these stable coins, and even they've been using like Bitcoin and Ethereum as well too, because it's easier, it's more stable, it's more secure than their own currency. Whereas I think we're seeing now in Argentina, there's talking about hyperinflation coming in again. Whereas if you got a stable coin that's based on the US dollar, you know, your currency, your Argentinian currency or your other country currency can inflate away. You don't care as much because you've transferred your wealth, as you mentioned, into these stable coins or into other stable assets like gold, for example. Look at the price of gold that we've been seeing.
yeah. Um, and all that kind of relates back and circles back to just global confidence in the dollar, as you know, and as a store of value. So we really are in unprecedented times financially, and I truly hope and see the potential that these things could be used. These new fintech, right, ideas could really benefit people, but they need to be monitored and looked out for, and ultimately kind of an open mind, because the greater problem for working people and for American families is just the dollar losing 10% of its value, and then just a greater government that doesn't seem to want to face reality as far as that. So there have been different times in history where policymakers have done different things and tried different things, to prevent ultimately a hyperinflationary situation. And I think that's what part of this stable coin, I hope and truly do hope that it does what it's supposed to do. With kind of keeping inflation under control, and it really opens the treasury markets to a much broader and more diverse market,
Yeah,
demographic, right? For sure, people as opposed to banks. So I think it's very interesting times.
yeah, yeah. I mean, that's good points. I mean, there's negative aspects to it too. It's like you've got your farm out there, and you've got chickens and whatnot. Let's say I come out to your farm, I want to buy a chicken, and I give you your $20, $30, whatever what it costs. Let's say, for example. So I give you that cash, and then you give me the chicken. That's it. You got the cash. I got the chicken. Who cares who else? Nobody else really knows. But as we see with credit cards, if you run a credit card swipe, you have to quote it properly. But even with these stable coins, I mean, it's digital. Then it's trackable. So in that case, if I come and buy your chicken over there, then it's trackable. Some people, from a privacy standpoint, that's not great, and that's why some people are worried about the CBDC, the central bank digital currency, because in those situations too, I mean, any digital currency, it's trackable. So they know, if I'm getting, let's say, rather than dollars, now we have CBDCs everywhere, and I get paid my 100 CBDCs a week or month, whatever you want to say. And then I go out and buy my groceries. I go and buy my, whatever food, pay for my social media services, streaming services, whatnot. So they know, where I'm sending that money to. And so today it's fine. Today it's X, streaming service is great. Everybody loves it. Tomorrow, for whatever reason, they determine it's anti-state, and now you're paying for that, for that service. We can actually track that. We track that. Hey, Paul over there, he's paying for this service that we consider, anti-state, anti-government. So that's treasonous. So let's not only are we going to shut off all of Paul's assets by turning off all his digital coin, his CBDCs, we also go back and whatever he may have in his virtual wallet, we're going to pull that back. So suddenly your wealth has kind of been sucked out from underneath you if you've gone all in on these either these stable coins, any type of digital currency. There's always that risk.
Definitely. Um, and I just think from it's a lot harder, I think, for people to steal titles, right, and to steal, wads of cash, right, and to steal hard assets than it is for people to do something digitally. Um, Unfortunately, there's every time a new technology is rolled out, there's kind of like, red team operators instantly that are looking to exploit it and scam people and hurt people. Um, but yeah, I think that's a huge concern just with censorship and with, privacy rights of people, and that's something that needs to be encoded. I think better, right? Like I think the founders envisioned a constitution that was, we were able to add amendments to that, and I think we need to do things that protect people's data and protect their information, protect them from, um, being targeted, whether it's by the local government or the state government or national government or foreign governments. We have to have laws and enforcement in place that prevents that. I think 100%. And so the fact that people aren't, in the public sphere, they're not really talking about that, and they're only focusing on the perceived benefits. It's definitely an issue and something that needs to be. The great thinkers need to get out and do it, because it's have a conversation that keeps the doors open for people to freely exchange ideas and to freely exchange goods. That's the American way. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, you talked about being able to steal virtually or digitally these coins or whatever, and there've been a lot of hacks, and they're already working on quantum computers. I think IBM and maybe Google has actual quantum computers. So in with what current encryption standards they're using, if they got quantum computers that are even, you know, semi what they say they're capable of. I mean, those encryption codes can be broken within, with the snap of the fingers. Those computers will be so fast and so capable that no matter what encryption you have, you know, your stable coins, your Bitcoin, whatever, they don't necessarily won't be safe, that some hacker can come along quickly, just swoop up, grab all your coins, digitally transfer them to themselves, and you're out of luck there.
yeah, um, and it's one thing I would tell the viewers too is it's just I think it's going to be more and more important for average citizens and everybody to just think more like attorneys in a lot of ways, right? When it comes to this kind of these kind of things. Um, like unfortunately, there's nothing. Someone wants to brute force and get into your stuff. I think there's very little that could stop them. Um, whatever kind of actor we're talking about. So I think it's just everybody. I hate to be that one that tells people like, hey, behave online and don't buy crazy shit, right? But it is America, and people are going to talk, and people could find out, and your records could be released. So it's just you have to be aware of that's a real concern. I think identities are in jeopardy every day. That's why they have these big class action settlements, and you're having people get paid by corporations because this information is now floating out there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely different times. This digital times have changed everything. So if your privacy's not there, and with your surveillance capitalism, there's been talk of, rather than the data being these corporations, like whether it be the credit scored companies, the banks who can, know data, there's been kicked around that everybody's data should be their personal data, and they carry it around in their personal, say, digital wallet or whatever. And if they need to use it to transact, let's say they need to go to you as a lender and say, hey, well, I want to buy a house. Here's my data. I have it personally. It's my data. I'm willing to share it with you, so that you can run your numbers and say, okay, yeah, Paul, you qualify, or Paul, you don't qualify, based on the data. So I think that's a better idea, something that, I think people in general need to think about too. The data, it's our data, it's my personal data, it's your personal data. We should control it versus, having these nameless, faceless corporations out there who at a whim can say, okay, you know, somebody stole my identity, suddenly my credit goes down to, 300. I didn't do anything, but they're not listening to me. They don't care. That's like, hey, you're just a number on my spreadsheet. We don't care. But meanwhile, you can't get credit to rent a house. You can't get credit to, if you need to buy a car, which these days, if you don't have a car, you can't get a job. So it's definitely a lot of impact over there. So something that, I think just for the public's insight to look at that, talk and read about it, where people are talking about that, the portable data, where you're taking your own data with you. Your own data belongs to you. I think it's a benefit overall for society.
yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. And really the system now is it stores a lot of information in depositories, and who knows how many places, right? Your information is hanging out, and it kind of gives me anxiety. And but I watch my stuff really closely. And I've had issues in the past with people gaining access to my stuff, and
Yep.
it's absolutely scary. So um I think it's important, like to partner and look at banks that that'll help you when bad things do come up, right? As far as
Yeah.
where you're depositing your funds at. But the most important thing is just to be diversified, because I feel like if you are under attack, you want to be dispersed.
Yeah.
Like in the Civil War, right? Your skirmish lines, and everybody was so many meters away from each other. So when you're thinking about assets, real estate investors, Paul, you work with, right? They're looking at different markets, right? They're not just in one spot. So whenever I see somebody that has a big chunk of change in a savings account or checking account and with one bank, I'm literally like, you need to diversify. Because what if this bank, heaven forbid, it goes out of business tomorrow, or heaven forbid, this happens or that happens. And I truly think worst case with this stuff, just um, mortgage banking, between what you see people and clients do, and as well as what the banks do, kind of creates trauma,
Yeah.
right? Like if you're in it for a long time, and you kind of like um, you see what you see these kind of situations, unfortunately, that make you realize that, hey, it's better to be vigilant and to just be disciplined and to stay on top of everything. So
Yeah. Yeah. Silicon Valley Bank, that's a perfect example. A couple of years ago went under. So while the government did step in and protect people even above the FDIC guarantees, that there's not always that guarantee. So like you said, spread your money around. Don't just stick it in one asset. Maybe you like real estate, maybe you like stocks, but diversify. As you build your wealth, you need to diversify.
absolutely. um,
Yeah, with that,
and
sorry, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, and that's what the government is doing too, with their with the Federal Reserve, with these stable coins, right? They're diversifying, tapping individual people to back these treasuries.
Yeah.
So.
All right, off of the serious topics, let's add another thing to our podcast. Let's chat about any good books you've been reading, either authors or names of the books. What are you reading, or what have you read in the past that still stands out to you?
Ooh, I'm reading. I read all kinds of books, as you know, Paul. And so right now I'm kind of reading like a weird one, and I could disclose it, but it's yeah, I'll grab it for you here. So it's about giants, cannibals, and monsters. Bigfoot in native culture. So it's a big book. This researcher put stories together from all sorts of different tribes. So I'm curious about that, and I thought it was an interesting read, so I picked it. I picked it up.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Yeah, I've been getting into some
How
of the
about you,
classics.
man?
I've been getting into some of the classics. I found. Have you ever heard of Project Gutenberg?
Um, like the printing press.
Yeah, I mean, there's the old Gutenberg, but on the internet, it's a website called Project Gutenberg. So any books that have fallen out of the copyright, they're no longer copyright, so they put them there for
Nice.
free. So I've been reading recently. I read a couple of Dostoevsky books, and then now a Tolstoy book, and so in the past I was never really got into it, but these are some incredible authors too. So I've been enjoying the kind of, especially it's free. Just pull it down, put it on your phone, put it on your your tablet, your computer, whatever, and just start reading away. So sometimes I'm sitting on the bus there or something like that, or somebody's driving me in the car and it's nobody's talking. I'll just flip open the book there, read a couple of paragraphs, and move on. So it's catching up on those classics though, which I've read some of the ones obviously in the school, but some of the bigger ones like your Dostoevsky, those are probably a little too in depth for the elementary, high school. Unless you really got into literature in college, then you probably went over those. But some pretty impressive writers, so I've been enjoying those.
I I've read Crime and Punishment. I want to say
Yeah,
that's Dostoevsky, I think, and I
yeah,
just was like, what did I read? Like at the end of it, like and that's the thing I try to avoid, like, because there's so much of it in culture, just like the crazy violence, So like when I remember reading that when I was younger because someone said I should, um, and yeah, like, but as a reader now, I would probably have a totally different, perspective. I think I've become more intellectual over time.
yeah, and that's what I
Um,
would say. I mean, you read it as a kid, you read it younger. Read it now as a somebody a little more mature. And the same thing when I read it, it was probably earlier this year I read it, and I would just I was impressed by it too. And then I think both Dostoevsky and Tolstoy are known for not just their works, but also inserting their philosophy, their philosophical thinking into their stories. So as a I'm sure as a young reader myself too, I probably wouldn't have caught it, and I would have thought the same thing. Was like, what the heck is this? But and just kind of seeing it and reading it recently, it's like, oh, yeah, it's a deep story. It's a very very enjoyable story. So fun.
oh yeah,
Yeah,
I might have read like a few pages of War and Peace. Um,
that's on my
like I
list.
didn't. Yeah, I didn't. I didn't get very far. But there's so many books out there, man.
Yeah,
Um, and like yeah, I like to find like obscure ones or just like the hard to find ones. So I'd say that's like a little side thing I like to do because I do have a ton of books out here, that. But I like to find the hard to find kind of ones. So the ones that
yeah.
the ones that are disappearing from the libraries, if you know what I mean. But
All right, with that, we'll end it for this podcast today. Thank you for watching. Feel free to drop your comments. Let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below. If you're listening on YouTube, if you're listening on Spotify, feel free to look us up on YouTube. It's pretty easy to find us. Just search for Green Chutes, and we'll see you in the next podcast.
have a great week.